Hey guys, and welcome to another video. Now, following on from the last video where I unboxed Valve's Steam Deck, today we're taking another look and we're going to compare it to the One X Player, a gaming handheld that I purchased back in 2021. Now, some questions have been raised about the Steam Deck from my other video. Links in the description down below if you want to check that out. And hopefully this video might clear up some of those questions and help you guys out for any information that you need. Now, both are very similar in what it is they're trying to achieve, but they do have some differences, and that's something we're going to take a look at. Now, Steam Deck is running SteamOS, which is a Linux backend, and it's quite nice. It means that there's very little overhead as well, so it'd be more effective and more efficient at running. Whereas the OneXPlayer, by default, it's actually running on Windows 10. I don't know if that's the case when you actually buy the device now. But when I bought it, it was running Windows 10. It's now been updated to Windows 11. As you can see here, I'm actually running Steam's Big Picture mode. So we'll be able to see some differences immediately from the Steam OS and the Steam Big Picture. Both very nice ways of handling it, but yeah. On the face, there are similarities. Both have dual analog sticks, as you can see here. And they both have analog triggers. So look here, analog triggers on the OneXPlayer. Got the analog triggers on the Steam Deck. So that's pretty cool. They have the bumper buttons as well, just as you'd expect. D-pad wise, both again very similar actually. But I do feel, yeah, I think the Steam Deck's D-pad is a little more clicky. I do find it a little weird though that the whole thing can be depressed. The same can be said though for OneXPlayer, it can be depressed, but there is a little more click to the Steam Deck one, whereas the OneXPlayer has a little click, but it seems a little bit mushier, which is not too bad though. It's fine. As for the buttons A, B, X, Y, I did say in my last video, it seemed like the Steam Deck buttons seem a little bit small, and I still think that as well, but they also more domed on top, I think. Slightly more domed, whereas on the, yeah, actually on the OneXPlayer, they are definitely more flatter, and I do find that a bit more comfortable, actually. They do feel marginally bigger, probably only by a millimeter or so, if that. But it does make the difference when it comes to actually pressing them. They both have front-facing speakers, like there, in stereo as well, and the sound on them is pretty all right. Like I said in the last video, no bass. You're not going to get bass on speakers this size, but they do the job just fine. And both of them have touchscreen as well. So as you can see there, both touchscreen. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Now that's where the similarities are, and there are a few more, but we're wanting to look at the differences. After all, this is a comparison. So first of all, let's start off with the Steam Deck and let's go into some specifications. I'm not trying to go too nerdy like, but yeah, this has an AMD APU, which is a CPU, that's a Zen 2, 4-core, 8-thread, clocked at 2.4 to 3.5 gigahertz. The onboard graphics is the RDNA2, which is clocked between 1 and 1.6 gigahertz. Now, my understanding is that Valve worked alongside AMD to produce this chip for this device. And yeah, it's actually pretty decent. It's got 16 gig of RAM, LPDDR5 RAM. You get a choice in the Steam Deck of 3 flavors of the device. You can get the one with a 64 gig eMMC memory, which is the slower memory, but I should imagine would do the job just fine. You get this one, which is the 256 gig variant, the NVMe SSD, or the 512 gig, which apparently it's faster. storage on the top end of the SSD storage. Has micro SD to upgrade your storage for games as well, and it works fine. As pointed out in my other video, there is a difference in loading times, but it functions. It is a little bit slower from the memory card, and especially as it gets hot, it throttles, causing more slower loading times and things like that. But it does work well. I've actually got Sleeping Dogs Definitive Edition, which it says it's unsupported on a Steam store for some strange reason. It works great. Well, I shouldn't be surprised. It works great on my OneXPlayer as well. But yeah, it works great and plays great. And it's loading off my memory card, and it seems to play smoothly, 60 frames per second on medium settings, and not a problem with that. But yeah, along with the Steam Deck, you get a 45-watt USB Type-C power delivery power supply, which is pretty cool. It has a 7-inch 1280 by 800, which is a 16 by 10 aspect ratio touchscreen. It's very glossy. You might note though, my screen looks different to my last video. I've actually installed a screen protector which has a matte finish, kind of similar to the top end Steam Deck that you pay the premium for. So the reflections are almost completely eliminated, but I do feel that it slightly dulls the vibrancy of the colours. Still looks great, but yeah, it does seem to dim down the colours on it a little bit, but that's not too much of a problem. But if you're interested in the screen protector I've got on my screen, I'll put a link in the description down below. It's not sponsored or anything. I'm not affiliated or anything, so I get nothing from it. It's just what I'm using, what I suggest. So yeah, you could check it out for yourself. Now on to the OneXPlayer. Now this, you can actually get this in 3 variants as well. There's a smaller one as well that you can actually pick up, but I'm just going to be talking about the one I have here, which is an Intel Core i7 1195 G7 CPU. Again, 4-core, 8-thread, and it has a boost clock of up to 5 gigahertz. Doesn't sustain that 5 gigahertz because it builds up a bit of heat in the process, but it's still an impressive clock. Has Intel Iris Xe graphics clocked at 1.4 gigahertz, and it's not something that should be underestimated compared to its Intel's HD and UHD family GPUs, which everybody pretty much knows the garbage. Not really for gaming. This is actually surprisingly capable. Don't expect discrete graphics card quality, but I'd say very close between Steam Deck and OneXPlayer. Now, difference here. This has an 8.4-inch IPS display. As you can see, it is bigger. It's a bit difficult to marry them up, but yeah, it is bigger than the Steam Deck's display. Resolution wise for the OneXPlayer, it's 2560 by 1600, which is quite a big leap when you compare it to the Steam Deck. So it really shows. It is again, it is a beautiful display. It's very reflective. Unfortunately, I've not found a screen protector for the OneXPlayer that has a matte finish like Steam Deck. I'd like to find one, but it is a lovely display, nice vibrant colours and everything else, just like Steam Deck. It has 16 gig of RAM, much like Steam Deck, but it has a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD storage, and they say it resides on a PCIe Gen 4 slot for the high speeds, which is pretty cool, and it is fast loading and everything else. Comes included with a 65-watt USB Type-C power delivery power supply. So the charging time is pretty decent. It can take probably a couple of hours to fully charge, but the battery on it is quite big. We'll talk about that shortly. Now, I actually had to get another power brick for it because the one that came with my device, it wasn't for UK. It was one of the 2-pin ones, I'm assuming US or something like that. So I ended up getting another one from, I think it's Evergreen, which does exact same specifications as the original power brick. So, and I've been quite pleased with it. So again, link in description down below for anybody who might get one of these for the UK. And yeah, it's the one I recommend. So just like with Steam Deck, actually, sorry, if I look up here, just right there, got micro SD slot. So you can actually expand the storage. I mean, 1 TB is pretty substantial for a handheld, but it can be expanded. Much like with Steam Deck, though, there is definitely a difference when it comes to using internal storage and using SD card when loading games. It works, it's just that loading times will be a bit slower. So yeah, it's something to bear in mind. Battery wise, so come on, wakey wakey Steam Deck. Battery wise, Steam Deck has a 5,313 milliamp hour battery, which depends on what you're doing with it, how long it lasts. OneXPlayer has a 15,300 milliamp hour battery. Quite a big difference again, but something you have to bear in mind is that this is also running Windows 11. So there are more things going on in the background. So it's going to be a little less efficient than Steam Deck. So yeah, you can imagine it will chew the battery a little bit faster than you'd expect. Still reasonably pad, I think. It's also pushing more pixels on the screen as well, with it being a much higher resolution screen. So yeah, the amount of power you get from the batteries between the devices, I'd say, would be relatively balanced out. Now, when it comes to interface, the Steam Deck, and this is something that came up in a question. Somebody actually was under the impression that there was more USB ports on the Steam Deck. No, one USB Type-C for charging and for interfacing. There's no other connections on it. If you look underneath, it's just a micro SD, nothing on the back. So it's just the one Type-C on the top. If you used a dock or a USB hub, then of course that would expand it, but then portability would be somewhat limited if you got something dangling off the back of it. So whereas if we look at the OneXPlayer, it has two types C, USB 3 as well. Now this port here is actually Thunderbolt as well, so that could be useful for if you decide to marry it up to an external GPU or something, as well as that. Convert this into a full desktop experience. Steam Deck will offer that when its dock arrives as well. But yeah, the ability to actually interface a full discrete GPU with this makes it interesting for those who might decide that they want to turn that into a full desktop experience. Now, weights wise, OneXPlayer weighs in, maybe if I'd set that. OneXPlayer weighs in at 810 grams, which is pretty all right, pretty meaty compared to Steam Deck at 695 grams. You actually do feel that difference when you actually playing the systems. Let's get that out of the way. Playing the system, so there is a bit of a weight difference there. Actually find that this OneXPlayer, it can get a little weight in the hands. I do have to actually somewhat sort of like rest my arms on something when I'm playing it because of the weight difference. It's also some of the things which I do need to discuss as well about form factor and ergonomics. But yeah, I do actually feel the difference in the weight, and also it can. I do actually find the OneXPlayer, as much as I love this thing, it can get a little uncomfortable. It's quite weighty, so I do feel like I do need to prop my arms on something after extended periods of play. Another problem as well, because of the shape that they're giving it there, it digs into the palm of my hand, and it can actually get quite uncomfortable. Unlike Steam Deck, which is nice and rounded, that's quite pointy, and I do sometimes feel like my hand starts to get like pins and needles from the pressure on it. It's not game breaking. It's not any deterrent from the actual device itself. But personally, I do think they could have rounded that off a little bit more. That would have made it much more comfortable. I think they've only done that for the grip, so it doesn't slip so easily out the palm of your hand. But in turn, yeah, it does feel like it digs into the palm of your hand a little bit. So yeah, now when it comes to the ergonomics, I do feel like the way Valve have done theirs, it's actually better, feels more comfortable in the hands. My hands can curl around it. This does have little grips there, but I do feel that the roundiness of the Steam Deck one actually makes the Steam Deck a bit more comfortable to actually handle as opposed to the OneXPlayer. So Valve have really thought about their design, and I do think it's actually paid off. It's come out quite nice. As for the controls, OneXPlayer, it uses an Xbox type setup. So yeah, you got your left analog stick and right analog stick. The left analog stick a little bit higher than the right analog stick. D-pad wise, it's underneath as well. I do actually like this layout, although I do find sometimes when I'm using it like that, my thumb on the right stick can get a little bit crampy for those games, particularly first-person shooter games. My thumb feels like it's cramping a little bit sometimes when I'm playing that. Other than that, though, they feel great. Analog sticks, nice, a little tiny grippiness to them, just enough so you're not sticking to them, but at the same time, though, your thumbs do not slip off too easy. Can easily reach triggers and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. The Steam Deck, though, I do actually feel their analog sticks are a bit slippy. My thumbs can slip off them quite easy. Although I would compare this Steam Deck more like PlayStation type controls with the analog sticks side by side. But yeah, still not quite because obviously the D-pad and the ABXY placements are fine. But yeah, it's taking a little bit of getting used to because I keep trying to reach down there for the D-pad because I'm used to it being down there. But it it does work nicely, and it is actually comfortable to play. Having these touch pads as well, or these track pads, they're very useful for games that particularly only have partial controller support. So you could probably use one or the other as like mouse control, ideal for certain survival games. And when you touch them, there is a nice little feedback in games as well. So that's pretty cool. You can use the touch screen on both devices, of course, but it's sometimes just nice to have these trackpads here, so then you're not keep shifting from controls to the screen and stuff like that. It's just nice to have them there, I do feel. Now, on a side note, on the rear of the OneXPlayer, there's actually a fingerprint scanner, which also acts as the power button. This allows you to do secure login on Windows using your fingerprint, which I think is actually pretty cool. So the system is relatively secure if you were to misplace it, something like that. So yeah, Steam Deck though, it's just simple power button. And it's secured really by your password into your Steam, and it stays logged in. Obviously, I could imagine in a worst case scenario, if you lost your Steam Deck, you could actually change your password and Steam, and it lock this out of Steam. But yeah, other than that, though, the system itself, it just relies on your login to Steam, and it's always logged in. So yeah, you wouldn't want to lose this. It's much like with Nintendo Switch as well. You log in, it stays logged in. Um, I like this extra layer of security on the OneXPlayer. The fact that we've got the login to Steam as well, but I've also got the fingerprint lock on the actual device to actually lock Windows as well, which I'm pretty pleased with. But got to be said though, and as I said earlier, you don't want to underestimate the GPU on the OneXPlayer. It is actually surprisingly capable. Now, some basic games or older titles will actually run at the system's native resolution with high graphics, and they look lush, they look gorgeous. And any games that don't work so well at the full resolution of the screen, you can actually obviously lower it down to 1080p or even lower than that. But of course, you would actually find then by doing that, as you lower the resolution of the game, the picture quality becomes softer because essentially you're taking fewer pixels and blowing them up onto, well, a high pixel density screen. So it does actually start looking a little bit blurry, whereas on Steam Deck 720p or 800p, whatever they want to call it, it looks gorgeous no matter what. And the only problem you would have is with certain games not being able to display the text very clearly, which is part of the reason why they do the Steam Deck verification, because some games might have text that you just can't read due to the resolution of the screen. Not so much of an issue with the OneXPlayer if the game will actually run in its native resolution. And yeah, it is a beautiful display. Battery life varies substantially on both devices. It all depends on what you're doing with them, really. And if you're playing a graphical game, then you might get, what, an hour, maybe a little bit more, depending on what you're playing before recharging. That's the same on both devices. But if you're playing older games that are less demanding, like I was playing Bully Scholarship Edition on my Steam Deck just a couple of days ago, and it was indicating over 4 hours of battery life, and that was running the game at native resolution, mostly high settings for what settings you can adjust in it, since it's a console port. It looked great, it played great, and it's stuck to 60 frames per second as well, which was quite impressive. But yeah, it depends on what you are going to do with the devices. The more intensive the work, or the more demanding the game, the quicker the battery is going to drain, really. And there's no definitive, or how long will the battery last. It all depends on what you are doing with it. Heat wise, I do feel the OneXPlayer is actually more efficient at pushing out heat. It does get a little warm on the back, but the OneXPlayer actually has two fans inside, and which it's able to push the heat out faster. Now, got to be noted that it makes it a little bit noisier with the fans, but when you're playing a game, that's not really a problem at all. You don't really. I get immersed into whatever game I'm playing on my OneXPlayer, and I don't really pay any attention to the fan noise at all. But you can actually hear the fan just randomly kicking in now. Whereas OneXPlayer, it has one fan out there, and the back of the unit does actually get quite hot. If I turn the play around, so it's around this area, so that's where the air goes in, and then the heat is dissipated out the top, but it gets really quite warm, and sometimes it can get quite uncomfortably warm. Sorry, out of frame. It can get a little uncomfortable when it gets really hot, and it can get really quite hot around the SD card area as well. It's not a complaint because at the end of the day, they are devices. They're in a compact design. You're going to expect heat. That's going to happen. There's no way around it. It is just a mere observation and something you probably have to be aware of. So, but when you're actually generally playing, as long as your hands aren't too much in that area or anything else like that, or if you're not constantly interacting with the touchscreen, everywhere else feels fine, and not really too much of a problem with that. So once again, referring back to the SD card slots, it's got to be noted that there is a difference in loading times when loading from the SD cards compared to using the internal storage. It's not game breaking, but there is a difference. Now, for example, I played Killer Instinct on both devices. I've tried them from the internal storage, and I've tried it from the SD card. When running on both devices, the internal storage, it's seamless in between fights and things like that. It's rapid, it's quick loading in, very little transition actually, and it's just full flow throughout, and it's a really enjoyable experience. With the SD card, there is a pause, and what it'll do is it'll actually it'll go to the little load thing, which internal wise it would do that and then go straight into the fight. With these on the SD card, that it will actually go onto the little load screen, but then it'll go to another load screen with tips on it, and it'll hang there for about 5 seconds. There is a slight delay before it then goes into the fight, so there is a difference in there. It's not, like I said, not game breaking. So, like I said, loading Sleeping Dogs off SD card on both devices, it plays great, and it doesn't seem to have any issues in game, and it looks great on both of them. But something that you do need to take note of. Now, a couple of more things to note. Valve also include a carry case along with the Steam Deck, no matter which one you purchase, which is ideal and great in my opinion. Whereas OneXPlayer doesn't include one. You can actually buy one separate. It looks quite generic. It fits very snug in there, the OneXPlayer. But yeah, it does have the OneXPlayer logo inside. But yeah, it's not included with it, so that comes at an extra price, and that's less ideal. But yeah, it's actually just fine, and it works fine as well. Steam or Valve, should I say, have actually announced the dock for Steam Deck as well. So it's still not been released as of the time of this video, but they have released that. I could imagine that you would be able to interface various other things with it without the dock, but yeah, that is a thing where they will eventually release the dock, allowing you to convert your system into a full-fledged system. But you would have to depend on all the internals of the Steam Deck. When we look at OneXPlayer, you can actually get this. So that will snap to the bottom of that, and immediately converts it into like a little notebook. It's not the greatest keyboard. Again, you pay a extra cost for this. It's a separate purchase, but it's fine. It does the job. It's not great feeling. It feels very flimsy and very weak, but it's nice little feature to have it, and it does, as pointed out, snaps on magnetically, which is pretty cool when you get it right. There you go. So it does snap on magnetically, and it's a handy little thing to have, and it works just fine as well. So yeah, you got to think as well though. The prices of the units are very, very, very different. So let's just get this out of the way. There we go. So yeah, Steam Deck. It's speaking in Great British pounds. This 256 gig unit of Steam Deck, it cost me £459. That's all inclusive of tax. I love how Britain includes tax, right? You don't have to worry about all the differences. OneXPlayer. Now, I did actually state 1,299 in my other video, but it was £1,199 at the time that I purchased it. Yeah, my bad. But yeah, but why such the big difference in cost? How is it Steam Deck is so cheap? Well, you think about it. You're buying into Steam's ecosystem with Steam Deck. Yes, they are making it. They made it an open platform. They said that you're more than welcome to install your own operating systems, but by default, it's got Steam on it. And that's where they're going to make the money back. They will make the money back through purchases of games, through people buying the games on Steam and things like that. So it's very much, when you think about Microsoft and Sony with their respective consoles, they will sell their machines technically at a loss, until they're actually able to develop them or produce them cheaper. But they will get their money back through sales of games for the systems. That's very much like Steam Deck. OneXPlayer, though, yeah, this is once you bought it, that's it. Transition's done. Apart from the accessories, which there aren't that many of them, but apart from accessories, they don't really have any other way of profiting from this system. So they do have to actually charge a premium from the get-go to actually make sure that they profit from it, because otherwise, what's the point? They can't afford to sell this at a loss. They're not going to gain anything from selling it at a loss. So you will. That's where the price difference comes in. You got to pay the premium for the One X Player because it's full-fledged open Windows system, and I know you can do that with Steam Deck, but Steam's Deck's actually designed initially for Steam, so you purchase their games from their ecosystem, whereas this is more open. You can actually, well, you could go to anywhere you want and purchase Ubisoft Store, EA Store, whatever. It's up to you. Epic Store as well. You can access all of them. You'd have to do a bit more fiddling on this. So basically, you're more tied into Steam's ecosystem on that. So yeah, that is essentially why there's a difference in price. Now, it came to me suggesting one over the other. I couldn't. I just couldn't. They both um, they both have the positives and the negatives. I love the touchpads on the Steam Deck, but I love the high resolution screen on the One X Player. Might or not always be able to use it in games, but it's nice to have that choice there. I like the having the full Windows experience on it. Allow me to be more flexible with what I do with it. I can run all my Steam games on it, whereas on Steam Deck, they've still got games that don't work on it. Not a problem with One X Player. If anything, the only hindrance would be potentially performance. Steam Deck, though, they have to make sure that the games do work. Now, I do find it interesting. Like I said with Sleeping Dogs, they actually say incompatible. It works. It works great. And it works great on One X Player. And I actually find that I can actually run it on 1920 by 1200 on One X Player, get the same performance as my Steam Deck. Um, and that's actually quite impressive. So that's why I'm saying it's a bit of a, it's interesting. It's a tough one. I couldn't suggest one over the other. I think really what it comes down to then is what you're willing to pay. Um, you pay a premium, and it's the One X Player is a beautiful, beautiful device. Has its flaws, heavy, a little bit uncomfortable in the hands. Doesn't have track pads on it, and it's Steam. You have to use Steam in big picture mode if to get a console-like experience with Steam, but it works fine. Whereas the Steam Deck more console, um, more consoleized really. Steam ecosystem. If you want, you can actually run the Linux by dropping to the desktop. Not something I really do. I bought it particularly for the gaming function, um, but yeah, it does exactly what it needs to. So it is a tough one. I think really the only thing that, apart from price, that could potentially put you off. One X Player, I think, is more readily available from various retailers online. You might have to do a bit of searching around trying to find the best deal. I got mine from Droix, which is a UK-based company that gets systems. And when I ordered it, I had it delivered to me next day, and it was great. In fact, actually, I've ordered from them a couple of times, and they've been amazing. So, for UK people, I'll actually put a link to Droid's website in the description down below as well. Um, Steam Deck, however, at this time, there is a long, long, long waiting time for this. And yes, they are ramping up production of it, but there's still quite a wait time. Some people are potentially looking at next year for the devices, and that's not if it's going to roll on for another year for, and that's a bit painful. It was a bit painful waiting over a year for mine. I'm relieved I finally got it, but yeah, it was quite painful waiting for it. Um, but it was worth the wait, I think. So, but would the Steam Deck replace my One X Player? They both have their place in my heart, in my opinion. I love both of them for their own merits. So I do hope you found this video informative, not too complicated. If I did ramble a little bit, maybe just let me know. But I'd like to know if any of you got one of these pieces of amazing kit. Which one do you have? And what's your experience with them? Let us know in the comments down below. Also, if you're still waiting on your Steam Deck, if you're in the waiting queue, when did you pre-order? How do you feel about the wait time that you've got for it? Sound off in the comments down below. And yeah, I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone though for the massive support of my Steam Deck unboxing video. It's been amazing. The feedback and the interactions from people on that video, brilliant. Can't fault you guys. You're amazing. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks very much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.